Hello, today in this video we're going to be making one of my favorite Pokemon, Spheal. I just think this one is really cute. I know it's not as popular as the starters, but I wanted to go ahead and make this one up today and show you how I did it. So let's get started with what materials we'll need. The yarn colors I'm using are, it's a little bit of a off-white, a little bit lighter shade of blue, and then just a scrap piece of black. You'll also need a 3.25 millimeter crochet hook, safety eyes, yarn needle, stitch marker. I've got some industrial strength glue. I've got a toothpick, and that'll help me get the glue onto the little spots we're going to make out of the white felt. We've got scissors and some polyfill. And so what we're going to do with the felt is we're going to go ahead and put cut out some white spots, and we're also going to have the fangs that come out from underneath the muzzle, and the toothpick helps as far as not touching the glue, because with E6000 glue it's pretty strong. Now you don't have to use this, it's just what I have, and I know that it'll adhere the little spots on there so they'll stay on longer. But if you're going to give this to a child, I would tend to stay away from using the E6000. So let's start off our Spheal with our blue yarn, and what we're going to do is start off with our magic ring. And how I make mine is by placing the yarn over my index and middle finger, bringing the yarn around, and then going over to cross over, and then just bringing it around the back, holding everything with my thumb. I take my hook and I go under the first line of yarn, bring it around, and then I just kind of scoop under, not grabbing anything, but just forming this little loop. I come back to the top, grab the second line of yarn, and just pull that through. And that's how I get my magic ring. And there's lots of tutorials that may show a much easier way of doing it. That's just the way it kind of clicked for me. So now we're going to crochet 6 single crochet into our magic ring. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We can pull our tail, but we don't want to pull it super tight. Even if there's a little bit of a gap in there, we'll go ahead and get that closed up after our next round. We want to make sure it's not too tight so it's easy to work into that first stitch. So we've got our 6 single crochet, and what we're going to do next in round 2 is we're going to increase in each of those stitches. So let's get started with round 2, increasing from 6 single crochet up to 12. And to do that, we're going to increase in each of the 6 stitches. So in our first stitch, we're going to crochet 1 and then 2 in the same stitch. And that is what we're going to do all the way around. There'll be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 11 and 12. And so now we can give this a much better pull and tighten those up, because as it gets bigger, it gets easier to get into those stitches. So we've got our 12 single crochet, and I am going to pop my stitch marker in my last stitch, and this is just to help me keep track of rows as we keep going on and on with increasing and then rows of single crochet. We are now on round 3, and we're going to increase from 12 stitches to 18. And our pattern to do our increases, in our first stitch we will do an increase. and in our second stitch, a single crochet. So we'll do an increase followed by a single crochet. And that's the pattern we are going to work all the way around, and that'll help us increase from 12 stitches to 18. And I'm going to start just crocheting over my tail just to get that out of the way. Yeah, let's see. So we'll do our increase and a single crochet. Okay, and then we're on our final, increase. And I'm just going to pop my stitch marker out and put that last single crochet in for round 3 and get my stitch marker right back in. We are now up to 18 stitches, and if you see that your little gap is starting to open back up, you may have to pull it a few times, you know, after the next couple rounds, but eventually it'll stay closed the farther you get along. But we've got 18 stitches, and now we're going to increase in round 4 from 18 stitches to 24. We are now ready for round 4 to increase from 18 stitches up to 24, and it's a pattern starting with an increase, there we go, an increase in our first stitch, followed by one single crochet and then another single crochet. We'll do an increase, single crochet, and then a single crochet. So a pretty easy little pattern all the way around. Got our increase, then one single crochet, and then two single crochets. Increase, 1 and 2, increase, 1 and 2, and here we are on our final increase of round 4, and then 1 and 2. We'll get the stitch marker popped back in, and we'll be ready to move on to our next increase round in round 5, where we'll go from 24 stitches up to 30. Okay, we're ready to go from 24 stitches up to 30, and this is round 5, and we're going to start off our pattern with our increase in the first stitch, and then we're going to do one single crochet, two single crochet, and then a third single crochet. So once again, the pattern is to increase, followed by a single crochet, single crochet, single crochet. Increase, then 1, 2, 3. Got our increase. Oops, there we go. 1, 2, 3, increase, whoops, popped right off, 1, 2, 3, and then our final increase, and then 1, 2, and 3. We are up to 30 stitches now. Almost. We're almost at 30. There we go. Now we've got 30 stitches, and in our next round we're going to increase from 30 to 36. So we are ready to increase from 30 stitches to 36 stitches, and we're on round 6. Our pattern will be to increase in our first stitch and then single crochet 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, we'll do our increase and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Grab some more yarn, and we'll increase 1, 2, 3, 4. Just keep on repeating the pattern, and we're getting close to the end of this row. 3, 4, and we've got our increase, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're on our final increase for row 6, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's pop our, oops, let's not bump the camera, but let's go ahead and pop our stitch marker back in. I don't think I can do a video without bumping the camera at least twice. So we got the first one out of the way. So we're up to 36 stitches, and in our next round, which will be round 7, we're going to be increasing to 42, and that'll be our final increase round, and then we'll just start single crocheting for a while. But we'll be going from 36 stitches to 42 in our round 7, which is next. We are on round 7, which is our final increase round. And what we're going to do is increase from 36 stitches to 42. And our pattern will be pretty familiar. We're just going to go ahead and increase in our first stitch, followed by 5 single crochet. There's 3, 4, and 5. So once again, we've got our increase. I apologize for the annoyingly squeaky yarn. There's 2, 3, 4, and 5, and increase, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got our increase about halfway through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Increase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, final increase. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So there we go. We've got our increase rounds done. And what we're going to do next is we're just going to be single crocheting just one in each stitch for rounds 8 through 11. So we are ready for rounds 8 through 11, and those are really nice and easy. They're just single crochet all the way around. So I'm going to get started with you, and then I'm going to have you complete rounds 8 through 11 on your own. But on round 11, I would like to have you stop about 3 stitches before your stitch marker or the end of the round, because that's when we're going to do our color change. And I'll go through and show you how I do my color change. And if there's an easier way for you, you can definitely do it that way. But we'll meet back up here about 3 stitches before the end of round 11. So we are almost at the very end of round 11. I stopped 3 stitches short, and I'm going to show you how I do my color change. We're going to change from the blue to the white. And how I do my color change is I take my white and I bring it over on top of this blue, and then just kind of keep it alongside the edge of my working yarn. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crochet over it for 2 stitches. So there's 1 and 2. So that just kind of keeps it in place. And then what I'll do is I'll take out my stitch marker. And in my very last stitch, I'm going to put my crochet needle in, grab my blue yarn, but instead of pulling the blue yarn through those 2 loops, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull through with my white. And that's going to get me ready to start the next stitch in white yarn. However you do your color change, that's no problem, but that's just something I wanted to show you how I did it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to complete rounds 12 and 13 using white yarn. And so we'll just get started, and I'll just kind of crochet over my blue yarn just a little bit and then cut it off. But yeah, we're all set with our color change, and we're just going to keep working in white for 2 more rounds. So go ahead and complete both rounds 12 and 13 using the white yarn. And you can go all the way up to your stitch marker because we're all set with the color change. And we will meet back here and we will go from there. So white yarn is in place, and then 2 more rows, 12, 13, and we'll be ready to start on row 14 when we get back. So we've changed over to white yarn and completed rows 12 and 13. So we're now ready to start row 14, which is going to be a decrease round. I do an invisible decrease, and I'll go ahead and show you how I do mine. So you go ahead and go under the front loop of the first stitch, immediately go under the front loop of the second stitch, pull through those 2 loops, and then pull through again. And then we're going to crochet 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I'll show that decrease again. You go under the front first loop, the front second loop, pull through, and pull through again. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches. And so that's our pattern for row 14. We've got our decrease followed by 5 single crochet. And if there's an easier way for you to do a decrease, go right ahead. I just wanted to show how I get mine completed, just to give you an option if you were wondering how one of the types of invisible decreases work. So we got our decrease, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Grab some more yarn. Okay, we got decrease. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to do our final decrease for round 14. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so in our next round, round 15, we're going to decrease from 36 stitches down to 30. So let's begin row 15, and we're going to decrease from 36 stitches down to 30. And our pattern will be to do our decrease followed by 4 single crochet. So there's 3, and we've got 4, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's see, decrease, 1, 2, 3, 4, about halfway. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'll be putting our safety eyes in next, along with getting some stuffing in there, which will make it so much easier to hold on to. And we're ready for our final decrease. And we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so next, before we start round 16, we'll start working on placing our safety eyes and getting a little stuffing in here and going from there. So to place my safety eyes, where I placed them is to count down between rows 8 and 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I place mine right along this row, and then I've got about 5 visible spaces in between the eyes. And one thing I do, as I'll show you on here, I place mine on the same side evenly between where the color change is, because the color change gets covered up by the little muzzle. Now you could also place yours in the back and then just try to have the tail go over it, but I find for me it was just easier to place them directly in between where the color change was. So we'll count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so here's 9. Right about here is right where the color changes. So I had about 5 spaces. So there's 1, 2, 3, and I'll place this one. Maybe one over, because I know these are kind of big eyes, so they cover up quite a bit. So let me start with this so I can see. Yep. And you can place yours however you want. This is just the way I decided to go ahead and do it, and I found out that, you know, it works best for me. So we've got the safety eyes, and that should work of where I'd like to have mine. So I'll go ahead and pop the backs on, and we'll go ahead and put some stuffing in, and that'll make it much easier to hold onto. So let me just grab some stuffing out of here. And we don't have to stuff it completely right now, because we can go ahead and stuff as we slowly decrease, but this just gives us a start. And I like to just kind of really push some in between those safety eyes and around them. And I think I'm actually going to push the safety eyes to one more. I only did like one click, one more click on each, or I'm not sure what you call that, but there we go. So that way they a little bit tighter up against the body. So like I said, I don't have it fully stuffed, but just enough to give it something you're actually able to hold on to. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start round 16, and we're going to decrease from 30 stitches down to 24. So we're on row 16, and let's decrease from 30 stitches to 24, and our pattern will be to decrease, and we'll follow that by 3 single crochets. Let me grab that. And again, that was to decrease, and then 1, 2, and 3 for our single crochets. One, 2, 3. And it's nice on the decrease rounds because as you go, they get shorter and quicker each time. So there's the decrease. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and our final decrease for round 16, and 1, 2, and 3. So we've completed round 16, and we're down to 24 stitches, and you can add a little more each time we decrease, or wait a couple rounds and then just put more stuffing in then, however you want to do it. But next we're going to decrease from 24 stitches down to 18, and that'll be in round 17. Let's keep going on through row 17, which will be decreasing from 24 stitches down to 18. And our pattern will just be to start off with our decrease, followed by 2 single crochet. And my squeaky yarn is back. So we've got our decrease, 1, 2, just out of curiosity, because I really love Pokemon, but what is your favorite Pokemon? I have so many I like. So far, my ultimate favorite is Victini, and I really got to learn how to make that one and make a pattern for it. But when I see Spheal, I mean, I know he's one of the common ones, but I always think he looks so cute and so happy all the time. So I was just thought his body didn't look too hard. He's just a big beach ball with some extra parts. So I thought I'll try to make him up. And so, oh goodness. So yeah, that's what got me to make Spheal. And so we've got our decrease, and then 1, 2, whoops, and there's my second camera bump. Okay, that's all I'm allowed. Yeah, we all know I'll do at least one more. So we got the final decrease, and we're on our final 2 crochets. All right, we are down to 18, and I'm going to add some more stuffing in, and then we will come back to row 18 and we'll decrease down to 12. Let's get started on row 18, decreasing down to 12 stitches from 18 stitches. So we've got our decrease, and the pattern gets easier and easier as we go, because all we do is decrease and then single crochet 1. Just a decrease and then single crochet 1. And it seems like when the spaces get smaller, I seem to struggle more and more on camera. It's like the smaller the area, the more my hook likes to slip out of everything. Alright, so we're down a few more. And so got another decrease, single crochet, decrease, and our final single crochet. And now is a really good time to add some more stuffing in, because what we're going to, all right, one more time. There we go. Because the next round will be decreasing from 12 stitches down to 6, and it gets a little hard to get that stuffing in there. So I go ahead and get it pretty much stuffed to how you want it, and then there will be a little bit of space after you decrease down to 6 where you can take like your scissors and push a little more in there if you still think you need some. So do as much as you can now, and if you need a little more, you will still have one last chance. So I've got mine pretty much stuffed as much as I would like, but what we'll do is we will decrease 3 times in a row and check and see if it is still needing a little more stuffing. But there's our first decrease, our second decrease, third decrease, and here's a chance if you think you need just a little bit more stuffing, a good chance to put it in. Otherwise, if you're happy with it, we'll just continue on and we'll do our fourth decrease, fifth, and then finally our sixth. And after this, you could still definitely get some stuffing in. It's just a little harder with that smaller gap. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slip stitch into the next stitch after my 6 decreases. I'm going to take and cut off a tail for sewing. And let's get our yarn needle. And how I like to sew this little remaining gap closed is I come under the next stitch in the front loop only, and I come up and through So I come from the back out, and I do that through all 6 stitches. And then once you get it through all 6 stitches, you can just give it a nice tug, and that'll pull that closed. And then you can just take your yarn and just kind of poke right through where the area cinched up, and just come through the body a few times. And kind of give it a pull, and that'll kind of flatten that area out. And then just kind of come through a few times through the body, and that's all you need to do. And you can just trim off your tail close to the body. Just be careful not to cut into your project. And if you have like just a little bit of the tail sticking out, just kind of squish your little guy up, and that'll pop right up there and hide it. So we have got the biggest part done, the body. And what we're going to do is, after this, we're going to start working on the tail. And then we'll work on the rest of the pieces. But let's get the tail over and done with, and then we'll just keep going from there. So we are ready to work on the tail. Now the tail's a little different to make because we're not going to be working in the round, but we'll go through each step to get the tail made. And what we're going to do is grab our blue yarn and make our slip knot. Now that we have our slip knot, we're going to chain 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we don't want to chain too tightly because we are going to be working in those back bumps on the chain. So we'll go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, whoops, 15. Okay, let me get some yarn ready. So we've got 15 stitches in our chain, and again, when we start working our chain, we are going to be working on that back area. So it's kind of like the spine of the chain. So here's the front, and then that back part, and those little bumps coming up is what we're working into. So we don't want to have the chain too tight, otherwise it can make it a little tricky to get into there. So we're going to start working down the back of our chain, and we'll do that from the second chain from the hook. And so as soon as you turn it, you'll be able to see that first little back bump. And what we're going to do is we're just going to single crochet all the way down those back bumps. So there's 1, 2, and we'll end up having 14 that we crochet down to. Now let's say you're having just a little bit of trouble getting into those back bumps. You can just take like your yarn needle and just kind of poke through and just kind of lift it up just a little bit. And if you're struggling, that'll make it just a little easier to get into, because I know they can be kind of frustrating. So we'll just go through all of them all the way down. And the reason why I do this is because it has just a little bit neater of a look. It has less gaps in it. Now if this is just a little too frustrating, no worries, you can just go ahead and, you know, do your single crochet into the chain regularly. But this is just how I do it for a more polished finish with the tail. So we'll just keep going down. And once you've done a few of these where you've crocheted down the back bump, you get a really good idea of tension as far as how tight or loose you want to work your chain. Okay, so we're coming down to the very end. And just a couple more. And that might be one that I'm going to have to kind of lift up. I know the very last one is the one that always gives me the most trouble. And so we'll try to go in there. Got it? Okay, so there we go. We've got our chain, and when we start on continuing around, we'll be taking, instead of continuing on this side, we're going to be turning our work and we're going to be starting on this opposite side. So we are ready to crochet 14 single crochets down this opposite side. And the first stitch can be a little hard to see because it's right at the beginning and it kind of can get a little scrunched or turned. But we're going to go in and crochet 14. So there's 1, and I know that they can be a little tight to go into because of the way that we crocheted into the back bumps, but it gets easier after we get past this. So there's 3, 4, let's grab this up. Whoops, let me redo that one. Got some squeaky yarn again. I didn't grab it very well. There we go. So that should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8. Wow, I'm just struggling with these. 9, 10, 11, 12. We got 13, and at the very end, it's kind of really tight right there, but there is 14. And what I'm going to do, now that I got that one, I'm going to place my stitch marker in that last stitch. And what we're going to do is we are going to crochet all the way around for a total of 28 stitches. So you'll have to look really closely at the next stitch where it begins, but you'll crochet all the way around and come back to your stitch marker and you'll have 28 stitches. So go ahead and crochet into each stitch and then we'll meet back once they're all done. So we're back with our 28 stitches, and what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of just break this up into parts. So let's first single crochet 13 stitches. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whoops, let me do 5 again, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 13. Okay, so we've got our 13 stitches. Now right here on this round part, and you may have to kind of bend it a little bit, but right here on the curve, we're going to decrease with those 2 stitches right on the curve. So we're going to do our invisible decrease. And then what we're going to do is we are going to single crochet 12 down this row. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And that does stop us one short of our stitch marker. So if you didn't get all the way up to the stitch marker, that's okay. That's not a problem. And so there we go. We have got the 13 stitches along one side, a decrease, and then we came up 12 stitches on this side. And then we will work another round. Okay, to start off this next round of the oval, we're going to start off with a decrease. And it's right there on that curve again. And I'm going to pop my stitch marker in the decrease stitch that we just did. So we've got the decrease done, and now we're going to single crochet 12. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, so you may have to kind of bend it a little bit, but we are now going to decrease on this curve. Okay, and we've got our decrease. And we're now going to single crochet 11. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And again, we stopped one short of the stitch marker, but that's okay. And so we've completed that part of the oval, and we will go ahead and do another loop around. So I popped out my stitch marker, and right here once again on that curve we're going to do our decrease. And I'll just pop my stitch marker right back in there. And we are now going to single crochet 11. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and again right here on this little curve we're going to decrease. So next we're going to crochet 10 down this row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, whoops, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Stopping again, 1 in front of the stitch marker. Okay, so that is the completion of that round. Okay, I popped my stitch marker back out, and even though it's a little off center, here on the curve, we're going to decrease. We are now going to single crochet 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now this time we're going to do 2 decreases with these 2 stitches and these two stitches. So 2 decreases in a row. Okay, we've got 1. And we've got 2. Now we're going to not decrease, we're going to single crochet 7. And I noticed I didn't get my stitch marker popped back in, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So our decrease, or I'm sorry, oh my goodness, our stitch marker would have been right here. Sorry about that one. I should have had it in there, but we'll get that in after this one. So again, now that we've decreased twice down here, we're going to decrease twice up here. So we've got the first decrease. Oh goodness, there's my third camera, smack. And I'm going to pop my stitch marker in now. And the next decrease. Okay, so now what we want to do, as I can like say, the nightmare is pretty much over. We have gotten through the frustrating confusion part. So what we're going to do now that we've got those done is we are going to single crochet around twice. And so it'll just be so much easier. So just go ahead and single crochet. It should be 18 stitches around. So if you want to, you can actually move your stitch marker to the stitch that you're in now, and then just crochet around 18 stitches twice. And then we'll meet back up when that's done. So you have made it all the way around and survived your tail, and I hope it wasn't as hard as in my head I think it is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you do a slip stitch, and then we are going to actually cut quite a long tail for sewing, and I'll show you what I mean. So with this, we're going to pretty much sew the tail closed, and then we're also going to sew down the tail to really make a division. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get some stuffing in here, and then what we'll do is we'll sew the tail closed and then divide it up into 3 sections. So I've got my stuffing, and I'll get that put in there. And you may kind of take your hook and just kind of get it deep into those little sides. And you don't have to like stuff it too much. It's going to kind of get pushed around a little bit when we do our sewing, but just enough to give it a little poof to it. Okay, so it doesn't take a whole lot, but then what we're going to do is we're going to take our yarn needle and we're just going to squeeze this together. And then what I do is I just go under one stitch, under the next stitch, kind of come out, and it's kind of hard because there's quite a bit of tail, and then I just come back through the other side and come out that side and just weave back and forth. So through one side and then back through. And this way it closes it up but gives us something to work with when we want to sew it on to the body. And before you get the last little bit, if you think kind of like I do that I would like just a little more stuffing, this is a great time to stop and get some stuffing in there. So I'm just going to take a little bit more, just use my scissors to kind of push that in there, and then we'll finish up the last little stitches and then use the rest of the tail to divide the sections. Okay, so we've got that, and I'll just come through, and there we go. Now we've got that closed, and then the next part we're going to do is just go straight down on 2 sides and just give it that divided look. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring my needle in a little bit and come, let's see if I can get it in there, and come out right about here. So just like a full stitch from the very end. And I am going to do this the easiest way I found, and you may find another way. If you want, you can just pull the yarn around and cinch it tight to make your divider, but what I've done is pretty much kind of the same thing, where I come in, go straight through, and then just kind of pull it tight, and then just work my way back and forth through the tail, going straight down to try to cinch up as much as possible. And there may be a much easier way, but I'm just kind of coming in back and forth through the tail. And this is totally preference on how you want to do it. But that's how I found that it kind of worked best for me. And so we'll just go back and forth. Oops, I lost my needle. Or I lost my yarn out of my needle. And so, not hard, just going back and forth trying to do it. And then here at the very end, you can just kind of bring it through. Just around that last little end area. And just kind of pull it tight. And that'll give you that divided part. And if you just want to come in through one of the stitches and just kind of come out about the same width on the opposite side, and then just do it again. And that is all it takes to make those dividing lines for the sections. So if you want to finish up the other side, then we'll go ahead and keep working on the rest of the parts. So we've got the tail all completed and divided into 3 sections, and I did leave a long enough tail for sewing. If you didn't, that's okay. You know, we can, if you don't have enough to sew onto the body, we can always get a fresh piece of yarn, just weave it in and then sew on through that. So that's not a problem. But we've got the tail all done, and now what we're going to do is we are going to work on the front flippers. And so we're going to go back to our white yarn, and I'm going to walk you through making the first one, and then I'll have you make the second. So we've got our white yarn, and we're going to start off with our magic loop or a magic ring. And after the making of that tail, this is going to seem like a walk in the park. So we're going to just start off with our magic ring, and we're going to single crochet 4 into it. Here's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we'll pull our tail, and then we've got our first round done with 4 single crochet. In our second round, we're going to increase to 6. So we're on round 2, and we're going to increase from 4 stitches to 6. And how we'll do that is in our first stitch, we're going to do an increase. Okay, and then in our second stitch, a single crochet. Our third stitch will be an increase. Oops, there we go. And then in our final stitch, a single crochet, and that'll get us up to 6 stitches. In the third round, we are going to be increasing from 6 to 8. Okay, we are ready to increase from 6 stitches to 8, and our pattern will be to increase in our first stitch, and then single crochet 1 in the second stitch, 1 in the third stitch, and then we will repeat that pattern. In the next stitch, we'll just go ahead and do an increase, and then a single crochet, and a single crochet. So we've got one more increase round. That'll be the next one, round 4, and we'll be increasing from 8 stitches to 10. We are on round 4 of our front flipper, and we are going to go from 8 stitches to 10, and our increase will be in our first stitch. So let's increase in the first stitch, and then single crochet 1 in the next 3 stitches, and we'll do that one more time. So we'll do an increase, and then 1, 2, and 3. And so we've got all our increases done, and then for rows 5 and 6, we'll just be single crocheting 1 in each stitch for those 2 rounds. Okay, so all we have to do is now just, oops, easier said than done, single crochet 1 in each stitch for the next 2 rounds, and then what we'll do is after we get those 2 rounds done, we will just make a slip stitch and leave a tail for sewing. So yeah, this is pretty easy as far as the flipper goes. And then after we get this next round done, and we slip stitch and leave a tail for sewing, what we'll do is we'll have you go and make a second one, and once you get that done, we'll set the ears aside and start working, or set the flipper aside, and we'll start working on the ears. And so that's really making progress on getting getting Spheal all done. It's just the tail. You can tell I made that pattern up myself because nobody else would have come up with such a backwards way of doing it. I'm sure there's much easier ways to make the tail. I just went with what made sense to me at the time. Okay, so we got our 2 rounds done. We do a slip stitch and leave a tail for sewing. We will be putting some stuffing in this, but we can wait until we're ready to assemble it. And so I'll have you make 1 more of these, and then we're going to go ahead and start on the ears. So I'll show you what one of the ears looks like completed. All this is a magic ring, and then you single crochet 8 times into the magic ring, slip stitch in the next stitch, and just leave a tail. So let's go ahead and get this made. This will be really quick and easy. So we'll make our magic ring. And we're going to single crochet 8. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We'll pull this closed, and then we're just going to slip stitch right into that first stitch, and then leave our tail for sewing. And then what you can do is you can pull this nice and tight to close up that gap, and to make sure it stays that way, you can just put a little knot in just to make sure everything doesn't start loosening up. So there we go. There's our ear. I'll have you make 1 more, and then we will start working on pretty much the last crocheted body part is just this muzzle. Okay, we are ready for the muzzle, and we are going to be chaining 13, but don't worry, this isn't going to be anything like the tail. It's going to be a whole lot easier, and we're not working in the back bumps either. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so we've got our 13 chains, and then what we're going to do is just work into the regular part of the chain all the way down, and we'll go through those steps next. So we've got our 13 chains, and starting from the second chain on the hook, we are going to do a slip stitch. We are going to do a half double crochet in the next stitch. In the next stitch, we are going to do 2 double crochets in the same stitch. So there's 1, and 2. We're going to do 2 double crochets in the next stitch as well. So there's 1, and 2. In the next stitch, we're going to do 1 half double crochet. In our next stitch, we're going to do a slip stitch. In the next stitch, we're also going to do a slip stitch. We are now going to do 1 half double crochet. We're going to next do 2 double crochets in the same stitch. There's 1, 2. In the next stitch, we're going to do 2 double crochets again. So there's 1, to, in the second from the last chain or stitch, we're going to do a half double crochet, and in the very last stitch will be a slip stitch. Okay, we're going to leave a tail for sewing, and we'll remove our hook, and then what we can do with our little muzzle is we can just tie a knot just to keep everything from coming apart. So we got that, and there we go. There's our muzzle, and now we can start working on making the little spots. And I just used white felt, so I used white felt to make 3 different sizes of the spots, and also the little fangs coming off of his muzzle. To make these little white spots, all I did was take some really cheap felt that I got from Walmart, and I cut out 3 different sizes. So on the Spheal, you can see there's 2 that are a little bit bigger and 1 smaller. There's the 2 bigger ones aren't that much different in size, so I've got a ruler, and you can kind of see they're just a little bit bigger than ½ an inch, and they're about, the biggest one's about 3/4 of an inch. And let's see what the second one is. It's about ½ an inch, and then this little guy, he's about 1/4 of an inch. And that's all I did to cut out for the sizes of the spots. And then if you are looking at the fangs that I cut out, it's about almost ½ an inch at the top, and it comes to about a little more than ½ an inch for the length. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You only see just a real little bit coming out of the muzzle, and then the spots, you know, just a few little spots that aren't too big on the sides. And what I did to place those is I just glued them on. If you really wanted to, you could make a magic ring and just do you know, 6 stitches in there and close it up and use those for spots as well. I just opted to use felt just to make it a little easier. So now that we have all the parts done, we can go ahead and start assembling. So we're just going to do the tail first, and we're just going to basically come right to the very back center, right on the dividing line of the colors. And what I like to do is I kind of get an idea, because I usually don't use pins, because I usually end up poking myself, because I'll squeeze too tight or something, and then the pin will come right through the other side, and it always seems to get me. So what I like to do is I just like to go ahead and line it up. And so I'll bring my needle in where I've got the beginning of the side of the tail, and it looks like the tail will come out or end right over here where my fingertip is. So I'll just pull that through, and then I will just come up through the end of that tail and just kind of pull it tight, and then look at it from the front to see, you know, is that right where I want it? And if it is, then I've got it really secured, you know, right there, and I can just kind of come back up to the original side, and that'll hold it right in place. And then I'm just going to stitch all the way around to hold it in place. And that's just whichever way works best for you, but I just use that little lip of the where we sewed it closed, and just kind of weave in and out of the body and into the tail. But however you sew onto your body parts, whatever works best for you, that's the, go ahead and do it that way. This is just how I kind of go through it. It's not a perfect method, but for me it gets the job done. So once you get your tail sewn on just the way you want it, we'll meet back up and we'll start working on the front flippers. So we are ready to start working on the flippers, and where I've placed mine is kind of centered with the body kind of right down the middle. So if you're looking at the side of the body, I know the flippers are kind of, because they're not stuffed real well, so they're kind of just moving around, but it kind of goes, if you're looking right at the top, I kind of go right down to the side. That way the way they're sitting, it kind of sits him up just right. Now you can place yours wherever you want. That's just kind of the idea I got off of looking at some of the Pokemon cards, and so I went with this way of doing it. And so what we're going to do is just get a little bit of stuffing, and it doesn't take a whole lot to fill these up, and you can decide how much you want to have as far as how stuffed you want it to be. I don't have it stuffed really firm. I kind of have it so they're just a little bit flat because of the way the photos looked, and so I'm just putting a little bit in. And so we'll go ahead. I think the cat is knocking on my door trying to get in, so hopefully he gets distracted. So we've got that, and what we'll do to sew this on is we'll just kind of come up through, kind of smooth everything out, and then on our little guy, just kind of come straight down. And how many stitches? It looks like there's 1, 2, 3 white rows of white. So 1, 2, 3. So right about there is where I'm going to sew on my flipper. So it'll sit just about like that. And then I'll just go through, that is a distracted cat, and we'll get our flipper sewn on both sides, and I'm going to go try to give my cat a treat and see if I can distract him. So go ahead and sew on your flippers, and then we will work on the muzzle and ear. So we've got our little flippers on, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to slip on these little ears, and that is pretty simple to do. So let me first take the short little tail, and we're going to take the first ear, and where I have it is, if you're looking right at the top, I have it pretty close to the center, just a little bit forward, and it looks like it's about 1, 2, 3, about the third, between the third and the fourth row is where I started it, and then there's 4, 5, and about the 5th and 6th row is where it ended. So we can go ahead and first we'll just take the short tail and just kind of get it, now start on this side, and just kind of, whoops, get it in there so it just kind of holds it in place. Oops, there we go. Pull that through, and that way it's just there, kind of just a placeholder, and then we can use the longer tail just to put a couple stitches in, just to hold it down. It doesn't take a whole lot. So we'll just kind of bring this one up, and again we're just kind of going through the very bottom of the ear just to kind of secure it in place. The ears are pretty simple, and then we'll just weave the tail in to get it out of the way. I'll just bring that down. So however you want to get your, oops, I'm way out of the thing. However you want to get your little ear on, that works. But yeah, I'm just pretty much putting a couple stitches to hold it in, and that's all you need. And then you can just put your second one in, and then the next one we'll work on the muzzle. Okay, we are ready for our muzzle. We got our little ears placed, and how I do the muzzle is it just kind of ends up starting just before the eye and ending right after the other eye, and it goes along the seam right underneath that eye. So it's going to be right, the sewing will go right above the color change. So when the muzzle goes on, you won't even be able to see the color change at all. And then for me, what I do is it's quite a bit like how I did the tail. Instead of pinning it, I kind of get an idea of where I want it to start and end. And so it looks like to me it's going to start here, and then I'll have it come out to this other side. This is my long tail, and I'll pull everything. Oops, if I don't get everything tangled. Okay, straighten everything out, and then I will take the muzzle and then just use the tail to bring it up into place. And I might need to reposition this, but if I get it just the way I want it, then I can just kind of go from here, and it kind of holds it in place. And then all I do is just stitch in and out right along the edge for the muzzle. So I just wanted to show like how I was sewing it on in case anybody did wonder. I'm basically just going down right along the edge and going into the head and just coming back up. And that is really all I'm doing, just to get this secured on. And so it's pretty easy. So just going in and then coming back out. And that's all it's going to take for sewing on the muzzle. And our last little bit will be just gluing on the spots and putting the little fangs on. So one other thing I almost forgot is why we need that scrap black yarn. And on the muzzle of the little Spheal are two diagonal little black lines, and that is what we needed the scrap for. It's just such a small amount that it just kind of slipped my mind, but we'll go ahead and get that done. So basically just come in and come up right underneath the muzzle with your black yarn, and then right from the little area where it kind of dips in, you can just kind of come up and then just kind of do a diagonal little line, and then just come up on the other side in the same place and just do one more. And that is all you have to do to get those little black spots on there. But they're just kind of a part of what gives his little face the look. So that's all it takes. And then next we'll start working on the little spots. So the placement of the spots is just kind of a little triangle right on the back end of the little guy. And what I like to use to hold those in place is E6000. And the reason I have the toothpick is because you don't really want to touch this stuff much. And you also want to do this in like a well-ventilated area. So I just use the toothpick to put on the glue, and that way I don't have to touch it too much. I guess this, from what I understand, it's kind of a toxic glue, but it does hold really well. So in this case, because I'm using this, I just wouldn't give this to a child. It's mostly just going to be something just kind of sitting. And so here's where I got the dots. And I think I made these much bigger than I did in the original one. So and just kind of put those on. So if those spots look too big for you, you can definitely cut them down smaller. This is how I thought I had made like a little template, and I thought this was the right size, but maybe I forgot that I had cut them down a little smaller once I got them on and realized, no, they look way too big. But again, just kind of sliding it on there. Try not to bump the camera. Just try not to get this glue everywhere, because once it's on, it's on. So, and it smells. Oh my gosh. I mean, it doesn't smell like so bad. It's just very industrial glue smelling. So we got that, and then we'll just get this last one placed and let that sit. And then what we have last, if I can figure out where I put them, are our little fangs. And so I'm just gonna put a little bit right here on the end, and then just lift up the muzzle and just stick it so that just a little bit's poking out. And so just lift that up and get the cap back on the glue before I make a mess out of that. And I think, other than not trying to touch him too much because of his drying glue, I think we've got him all set. We did it! We got through it, and we've got everything all completed and put together. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you would like more Pokemon tutorials, please let me know down in the comments. I'd be glad to make some more up, and I hope this one worked out for you. I'd love to see any of your creations, not only from this video, but any of my other tutorials. You can send that to my Instagram, which I'll have posted, and you know, I'm just so happy we got through this one, and maybe the tail wasn't nearly as bad as I made it out, but let me know in the comments, did I overreact on how tough the tail was, or was it all in my head? I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for sticking it out with me. All right, bye.